Welcome back to our first episode of our final year of music. This year, we're going to be focusing mostly on kind of the last 120 to 140 years of music when it comes to Western music, especially. So far in the beginning band, we did kind of our quick introduction to music history plus the elements of music. And then every subsequent year, we've been working through those lessons. So let's start in on episode 1 of year 5. It's episode 56 of 70, talking about music and modernism. So let's jump into it. So between 1890 and 1940, Europe and America experienced significant transformations in their societies and the art that they produced. These changes were influenced by various factors, such as the decline of romantic political ideals, the rapid growth of industries, and the rise of nationalism. The period reached a climax with the upheavals of World War I from 1914 to 1918 and World War II that started in 1939 and 1945. During this time, artists responded to these changes in different ways, echoing trends from the 19th century. Some artists embraced new forms of expression and techniques, like Richard Wagner, while others sought inspiration in more traditional styles, like Johannes Brahms. The first group, known as modernists, captivated the artistic world before World War I with their daring experimentation and innovation, which sometimes admittedly caused controversy. Explore these innovations in the introduction and the coming topics as well. The second group, embracing more traditional approaches, flourished between the world wars as a response to the challenges posed by modernism. We'll learn about some of these composers later on. So in the 19th century, two major historical forces shaped the world: industrialization and the rise of modern nation states, as we sort of mentioned earlier. Ever since the scientific advancements of the 17th century, technology had been rapidly evolving. The harnessing of steam power in the 18th century was just the beginning. The 19th century saw the emergence of electricity, leading to the development of railroads, automobiles, air travel, telephones, movies, and sound recordings. Rural societies transformed into urban centers dominated by industry and commerce, led by self-made entrepreneurs. These changes happened rapidly, causing both excitement and uncertainty, kind of like we have about AI right now. Despite the progress in science and technology, there were glaring issues, such as the appalling conditions of the new industrial poor, highlighted by writers like Charles Dickens and political figures like Karl Marx. Additionally, advancements in weaponry during conflicts like the American Civil War and World War I showcased technology's destructive potential, leading to unprecedented casualties and questioning the notion of progress. Meanwhile, scientific discoveries in the fields like physics, biology, and psychology challenged fundamental beliefs about life. Einstein's theory of relativity, while initially more philosophical, later contributed to the development of nuclear weapons, further unsettling people's sense of uncertainty. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution stirred debates about the origins of humanity, while Sigmund Freud's psychological theories suggested that individuals were driven by unconscious forces beyond their control. These scientific and philosophical upheavals deepened the crisis in religion and led to profound shifts in understanding human behavior. Despite uncertainties, the new century also introduced the concept of psychotherapy as a means of addressing personal struggles, setting the stage for new approaches to understanding the human psyche. As traditional beliefs in physics, religion, and psychology came under scrutiny, it wasn't long before the arts faced questions too. One such assumption was that visual art had to depict something recognizable from the real world. Once this notion was challenged and discarded, artists found freedom to explore the materials of their craft for their own sake, leading to the emergence of abstract painting, also known as non-representational art. Avant-garde artists developed entirely new languages for artistic expression, like the groundbreaking Cubist style exemplified by Georges Barak's paintings. Cubism was one of the earliest forms of abstract or near abstract art, developed around the time of World War I by Picasso and Barak, as well as others. In this Baroque painting, one can discern a guitar and the score of Socrate, the work by the modernist composer Erik Satie. In literature, the expectation that writers would adhere to conventional sentence structure and grammar was overturned. This newfound freedom allowed for a deeper exploration of the unconscious mind and irrational impulses, echoing Freud's theories. James Joyce's groundbreaking novel Ulysses, published in 1922, employed the stream of consciousness technique, offering readers a glimpse into the complex workings of the human psyche. His later work, like Finnegan's Wake, experimented with hybrid language, blending English with invented words. In the realm of music, traditional notions of melody, harmony, and tonality were challenged. Avant-garde composers questioned or rejected the established rules of rhythm, meter, and melody. Some explored complex and dissonant harmonies, while others experimented with new scales beyond the traditional major and minor. This period saw a departure from conventional musical forms and structures, with composers pushing the boundaries of musical expression. During this time, artists from various disciplines often gathered in formal or informal groups to support and exchange ideas. Claude Debussy, for instance, found inspiration among avant-garde poets, while Schoenberg, Arnold Schoenberg that is, a painter as well as a musician, associated with artists who shared their innovative ideas in publications like The Blue Rider, named after a painting by the pioneer non-representational artist Vasily Kandinsky. The interchange between artists of different mediums led to cross-pollination of ideas, resulting in similar experimental tendencies across various artistic disciplines. The innovative languages of avant-garde art were undeniably challenging, often leaving audiences perplexed. Even today, James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake remains largely incomprehensible to most readers. Avant-garde art became increasingly detached from the everyday experiences of ordinary people, leading to a sense of abstraction from society itself. Simultaneously, the modernists' focus on artistic technique led to a different kind of abstraction. The separation of technique from emotional expression. While some welcome this emphasis on technical skill as a departure from the intense emotionality of late romantic music, others found it cold and uninviting. In the 1920s, the pursuit of objectivity became an ideal for many artists, often resulting in works that felt abstract and devoid of warmth. During this avant-garde phase, artists experimented with schematic and even mathematical approaches to their craft. Piet Mondrian, for instance, created paintings composed of straight lines and bold colors, as you see here. Composer Igor Stravinsky championed objectivity in music, criticizing the emotional excesses of Romanticism. His music, characterized by brisk, mechanistic rhythms, stood in stark contrast to the expressive rubato of the 19th century. This painting that you see here in front of you is called Victory Boogie Woogie by the painter Pierre Mondrian. The mechanical rhythm of jazz, or as he perceived them, here are translated into systematic color arrangements. Some composers, inspired by the rhythms of machinery, sought to evoke industrial sounds in their compositions. George Antheil, for example, composed Ballet Mécanique, while A.V. Mosolov wrote The Iron Foundry, and Arthur Honegger composed Pacific 231, all of which captured the mechanical essence of modern life. The Italian futurists, known more for their bold declarations than their actual musical output, called for a music of the machine age and incorporated industrial noises into their compositions. They even developed a mechanized noise intoner capable of producing a range of industrial sounds from explosions to howls. The roots of modernism can be traced back to the late 19th century, reaching its pinnacle in the 20th century. One of the most well-known modernist movements, Impressionism, emerged in the 1870s, captivating audiences with its innovative use of color patches to depict everyday scenes. Artists like Edouard Manet and Claude Monet sought to capture the fleeting qualities of light that rejected the idealized and overly emotional art of Romanticism. Soon after Impressionism, Symbolism emerged as a consciously unrealistic artistic movement. Symbolist poets rebelled against the strict referential use of words, advocating for a more symbolic and suggestive approach to language. They believed that words should be free to evoke rich and ambiguous meanings, akin to music, which could convey emotions and ideas without adhering to conventional structures. Here on this page, the first story. These horses and riders are all painted by Vasily Kandinsky over a 4-year period. And it shows his path towards non-representational painting. In the first picture, the figures are quite clear. In the last, they could be missed entirely. So the first painting is couples on horseback, then you've got Blue Mountain, and then finally romantic landscape. I'm sorry that I'm kind of blocking it. In the realm of music, Claude Debussy is often labeled as an impressionist due to his use of fragmentary motives and flashes of tone color reminiscent of impressionist painting techniques. However, Debussy's true artistic essence lies in symbolism. where suggestion takes precedence over explicit statements. Inspired by symbolist texts, Debussy composed iconic works such as the orchestral prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun and the opera Pelléas et Mélisande. In these compositions, Debussy's evocative musical symbols intertwine with the elusive verbal symbols of what writers like Stéphane Mallarmé and Maurice Maeterlinck, creating an atmosphere of mysterious suggestion. In the vibrant artistic hubs of Paris and Vienna, two immigrant artists embarked on distinct yet parallel journeys towards completely abstract paintings. Kandinsky, a Russian-born painter, epitomized the German Expressionist movement, which sought to convey intense human emotion by divorcing art from literal representation. On the previous slide, his horse and rider paintings exemplify this approach, utilizing harsh colors, irregular shapes, and jagged lines to evoke inner turmoil rather than depicting external realities. His later works, like Romantic Landscape, verges on complete abstraction, representing a departure from traditional artistic conventions. Meanwhile, in Paris, a group known as Les Fauves, or the Wild Beasts, experimented with distorted images bordering on the grotesque. Inspired by primitive art forms, the Wild Beasts defied the constraints of European artistic norms. Pablo Picasso's groundbreaking painting, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, exemplifies this departure from convention. With its angular features and African mask-like faces, challenging traditional rules of human portrayal. Picasso would later push the boundaries of abstraction even further with the development of Cubism. Both Kandinsky and Picasso's work from this period exuded a sense of violence, a stark departure from the serene landscapes and soft figures of Impressionist art. Composers like Bela Bartok and Igor Stravinsky mirrored this intensity in their music, with Bartok's Allegro Barbaro and Stravinsky's ballet The Rite of Spring depicting the themes of barbarism and human sacrifice, reflecting a departure from the gentler tones of previous musical compositions. Unlike paintings or literature, music has never relied on tangible representation or explicit reference. However, it did have its own established principles and internal logic, revolving around elements like melody, harmony, tonality, tone, color, and rhythm. What you see here on the screen is Picasso's famous shocker, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which I mentioned on the previous page. Picasso and other abstract painters designed sets for the Diaghilev Ballet Russe, sponsor of Stravinsky and other modernist composers as well. The music of iconic composers like Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms adhered to these traditional principles, as did the vast repertoire of Western European folk songs, popular tunes, dances, and marches. However, modernist music marked a departure from the norm. Similar to abstract painting, modernist composers forged new principles, rooted in the intrinsic material of music itself. Before World War I, avant-garde composers were particularly focused on redefining melody, harmony, and tonality. These aspects became the primary concerns of musical experimentation during this period. It wasn't until after World War II that developments in tone color and rhythm, encompassing musical sonority and temporal structure, took center stage in the evolution of modernist music. Throughout history, melody, harmony, and tonality have been intricately intertwined. Harmony initially served to support and embellish melody, while tonality clarified both melody and harmony, eventually becoming a fundamental organizing principle in Western art music. However, in the early 20th century, each of these elements underwent significant transformation. Viennese classical composers such as Mozart or Haydn placed a strong emphasis on melody in their music, while romantics like Schubert and Schumann elevated melody as a potent vehicle for conveying intense emotion. Despite Wagner's melodic leitmotifs, his singing lines were often criticized for their complexity, and Mahler's incorporation of folk-like tunes into his compositions puzzled and sometimes irritated audiences with their bittersweet distortions. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Arnold Schoenberg was crafting complex melodies that challenged contemporary sensibilities. Schoenberg's melodies, with their intense rhythms and anguished intervals, pushed the boundaries of romanticism to the point of near abstraction. Here's an example by Schoenberg. Beyond Vienna, Claude Debussy explored a more ethereal approach to melody, often using shadowy motives that hinted at melody without fully formed tunes. In Paris, Igor Stravinsky took Russian folk songs and pared them down into simple, emotionless fragments, devoid of subjective meaning. In the evolving landscape of early 20th century music, traditional notions of melody were shattered, giving way to new and experimental approaches that tested the boundaries of musical expression. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European classical music began to embrace influences from non-European traditions, making a significant shift in musical exploration. Debussy, inspired by African masques and Indonesian gamelan music, sought to incorporate these exotic sounds into his compositions. He experimented with new scales, including the pentatonic scale, which he used in works like Clouds. Here's an example of that pentatonic scale. So a pentatonic scale, penta meaning five, tonic meaning sound. So you can see that on this first one of this page, and here are the examples of the pentatonic scale, or the other one, and then they would both repeat. The traditional diatonic scale, which had long been the foundation of Western music, was now being reconsidered. Composers like Charles Ives in America and Debussy in Europe began to explore new scales, such as we said the pentatonic, which offered a different set of tonal possibilities. Here's Clouds, so you can sort of hear a little bit. A little bit different type of melody. The whole tone scale, dividing the octave into six equal parts, created a dreamy and ambiguous sound favored by Debussy. If you remember, our normal scale has a series of whole tones and semitones. You have whole tone, semitone, whole tone, semitone. But the whole tone scale does not include any semitones. It's all just whole tones and sounds a little something like this. It kind of has that like ethereal dreamlike quality. The octatonic scale, which was a favorite of Stravinsky, alternated whole and half steps to fit eight pitches into the octave. So instead of whole, half, this one went whole, half, whole, half, whole, half. And it sounds a little something like this. However, the most significant development in this period was the advent of serialism, a new compositional technique invented by Arnold Schoenberg in the 1920s. Serialism created a new language for music, akin to creating a special scale for each composition. This innovative approach to composition would have a profound impact on the future of classical music, pushing boundaries and challenging conventions. As melody evolved to become more intricate, fragmented, or elusive, harmony took on a progressively dissonant quality. Consonance and dissonance, fundamental concepts in music theory, hinge on the idea that certain combinations of pitches create stability, or consonant sounds, or chords, while others produce tension, dissonant chords, that begs for resolution. Arnold Schoenberg famously spoke of the emancipation of dissonance, advocating for dissonance to be free from the traditional expectations of resolution to consonance. Tonality, the sense of centrality or focus around a particular pitch, became increasingly ambiguous as melody became more complex and harmony more dissonant. Eventually, some compositions reached a point where no discernible tone of center would be identified, leading to the emergence of atonal music. Melody, harmony, and tonality are intimately intertwined, often humorously referred to as the Holy Trinity of music by conservative musicians around 1900. The liberation of melody, harmony, and tonality occurred simultaneously, making a defining characteristic of the early 20th century avant-garde music movement. This joint emancipation represents a pivotal shift in musical style during this period. And with that, that's our first episode. Come back next week when we're actually going to take a bit more of an in-depth look at this time period. And this is where we're spending the rest of our year. So see you back here next time for episode 77. Have a great time and cheers.